Welcome to Tailboard Talk, a fourth shift fitcast. The mission of Tailboard Talk and the fourth shift fitness is to educate and train fire service personnel to increase durability and decrease the potential for injuries and their associated costs. My name is Chris Morella, owner and founder of Fourth Shift Fitness. I'll use my experience as a personal trainer, strength coach, and 15-year veteran of the fire service to deliver tips, tricks, lessons, and information specifically geared towards the health and wellness of firefighters and paramedics. Each episode, you'll leave with immediate deliverables that will improve performance and resilience and keep you in the fight through your career and into retirement. Let's get into it. What's up, guys? Chris from Fourth Shift Fitness, and we're doing a special tailboard talk today because I have in person a special guest. This is actually someone that I've asked to be semi-permanent or as permanent as he wants or as frequent as he wants, co-host slash visitor slash guest slash voice of reason. And that's Curt Hanson. Curt Hanson's the guy that gave me my first legitimate coaching job at LGN, the gym that I used to work at and he still runs. We both work on the same fire department together. He's got a few more years on than me. And I used to live about a mile away from the gym that he opened up when he moved it up to the area. And so I bugged him incessantly for about 6 months for a job. He eventually gave it to me. And he was the guy who let me start cutting my teeth as an actual coach and not just an illegal coach, just giving people bad advice when I felt like it. And kind of took me through from 2012 or so until today. So that's going to kind of relate to the topic that we're going to talk about today, is that transition from enthusiast to coach, and also, as it's been so politely put, the idiot versus expert. We see that a lot on social media, and it's a topic that Curt and I go back and forth on frequently. And by go back and forth on, I mean we send each other examples of each frequently and then make fun of them in our direct messages. So I'm going to give it to Curt. He's going to give you as short or as long, hopefully short, of a bio as he wants, because we both have a healthy distaste for background bios and all that filler that comes with them. So without further ado, Curt, thanks for coming by and being willing to be part of this podcast for as much as you can tolerate.
Absolutely.
And we'll go from there, man. So tell the 10 or 12 people who listen to this who you are and what's going on.
Yeah, so I'll keep it a little shorter on it, only because if I plan on being around here for a little bit, I'm sure we'll get more and more into the background as we go. But so yeah, I work with Chris at the fire department. I think I'm in year 17 right now. On the other side of things, I got into fitness just out of high school in 1999. Started out as a towel boy at a local gym and just kind of worked up from there. 2011, I think, ended up opening LGN, and shortly thereafter is when Chris came aboard, exactly as he stated, just bothered me about it for 6 or 7 months, and it turned it into a pretty good thing. And I think our natural competitiveness from our previous backgrounds also really helped kind of propel our coaching acumen a lot further on. It was just nice to have somebody to always bounce things off of and keep you in check and be smarter than you most of the time, and then realize you had to step up your game. And long story short, I think that ends up to about here today.
Yeah, to the fact that I was so smart I quit a stable coaching job at your gym and decided to risk it all with my own private endeavor, which has worked out perfectly in the pandemic.
On the lucky side of that, I got you to install the turf at the new facility before that happened.
Yeah.
And you did one class there before you opened, right? The first day, and then that was it?
Yeah, I think I was instrumental in convincing you to extend your lease and moving gyms, and then I was instrumental in getting you locked in and rooted in that gym, and then as soon as that was done, I decided to leave as fast as I could.
Seems about right.
Leave with you holding.
That's how I remember it.
Loading
well.
all the risk in that equation. So one of the reasons I asked Curt to be a part of this thing is because time and time again, whether it was coaching or firefighting stuff or leadership stuff or whatever it was, people would come to us with questions, and it seemed like we both heard the question completely differently, which we probably did because I was probably answering it before the person was done talking, kind of a flaw of mine. But we would come up with almost completely different answers for the same exact question. And that was kind of cool because where one of us would be focusing on like more of maybe the biomechanical side of why someone was having an issue with the squat. The other one was more focused on maybe the mindset or the kind of the preparation side of it. And then it would flip from time to time. So we both kind of moved our targets around in the way we would answer questions, but for some reason they were always vastly, vastly different. And I figured that'd be a pretty good thing to bring on here. And a couple episodes ago, I think I was talking with Katie, and we started quickly talking about like the tips for coaches and how to spot a fraud of a coach. And I started talking about how when coaches lack experience or education or substance, that's when they fall back on their personalities and their peppiness and their good-looking either bodies or Instagram profile to gain clients. But once you get past that, you're kind of screwed. And that's something that Curt and I have talked about for a long, long time. So much so that I forgot to grab the quote during Katie's episode, and I forgot to grab it again today. But I know we've shared it back and forth, and it was somebody basically saying like we all have something to learn from frauds of coaches because they found a way to make people trust them more than us, and we should take a lesson from all the frauds. And it was a well-known strength and conditioning coach that said that. But Curt said, "Hey, I want to talk about that because that's a good softball for both of us." So, what I wanted to ask Curt was how he picks out an idiot versus an expert, or an enthusiast versus a coach. What's some of the things that he looks for first, and then we can kind of unravel this conversation from there. So when you're looking through social media, or when you go to a seminar, because we've both been to several seminars together where we've almost like walked out after the person started talking, and not in like a, we're better than you way, but almost like a, this isn't for us, this person's kind of off base, and this isn't what we want to be here for kind of way. What do you look for first when you're trying to figure out if someone's a good coach or not?
I think, where I kind of start is I look at kind of their body of work. And if I can see that visually, that's usually where I start. And I understand that everything that is on the internet is often just a 10-second clip of a movie. But on the flip side of that, if people are willing to put their clients who are currently in compromised positions or misinformation, and that's advertising for them, or that's a standard that they're willing to publish as their acceptable standard, I think that's kind of the first place that I look in terms of gauging whether or not I think that this person knows what they're talking about, or is more of an enthusiast or kind of an imposter as a coach at that point in time, and just has a clientele that's willing to do what they ask them to do versus be educated on what they should do. I don't always gauge the amount of letters behind someone's name is the best thing to do. And I think we've gone to a lot of seminars where you can tell that the person spent a ton of time learning and studying and, reviewing journals and whatever it may be, but have they actually spoken to another human being and asked them to do what they're championing in that current presentation, and whether or not that ends up being something that's legit or not, or something that just exists in a vacuum and seems like a good talking point that someone can make money off of pretty quick. And those are kind of the two places that I start, that I think that I look for. I think that the hard thing too is that as people who are a little bit more on the side of experts versus idiots, we have a much harsher eye for looking at and trying to either debunk or avail someone as an expert. And it's a much more, I feel like for us, it's a much more black and white thing than the opposite, than the consumer who's coming in and might be looking for a service to be provided for them. And whether that's that, and I'll always mess up the word, the Schadenfreudeism, is that what it is, where you hope that your peers fail?
Schneidenfruit?
Whatever that word is.
I'll look it up.
There's a word that I think it's a German-based word, but basically it's you almost root for your peers to fail in some sense, and it can even be your best friend or whatever it is. But there's a part of you that wants them to succeed, but also a little part of you that wants them to fail as well.
I'm familiar with that feeling. I really enjoy when people fail. I'm trying to look it up now. There's no word that comes up right away, but I'm also not Googling the right thing. Schadenfreude. How about that?
There it is.
Pleasure derived by someone from another person's misfortune. I mean, that's most of the internet.
Yes.
Which I appreciate at this point. Yeah, I feel the same way. Now this is an example where we both go differently. Is I get roped in way too quickly by someone who moves well or someone who speaks well, and I go not all in on them, but I'm like, okay, this person's got it going on. Like if someone squats really heavy, really well, I'm like, oh, they must be smart.
Right.
Like it's not
Yep.
true or correct. And I've been proven wrong in that time and time again. And it's usually, so let's say there's a really strong person and they're squatting and you watch that and you're like, that was a really good 800-pound squat. I'm going to follow this person because they must know what's going on. And then you start following them and that's all they do is put up videos of their 800-pound squats or they're like their 500-pound bench press. And you're like, okay, I see what you're doing. And then they never get around to either educating or showing like any of their actual work or like accessory work. And then something happens and they get like an interview or they get a chance to be in front of the camera and you're like, oh, you're just a really strong idiot. Like that's what I've been following and hoping. And it's been cool to watch you squat, but now I have to not follow you anymore because I hate you because you don't have the brains, but you have more physical ability than I'll ever have. And now I hate you and I have to unfollow you, which is probably not healthy, but
I think there's a lot of people who, I think you kind of get set into two different tracks on the internet of your own content that you post and whether or not you're using the internet as a mirror to kind of champion yourself or whether you're looking at it as like a window for people to look through to see quality content and things that they can actually take and utilize for themselves. And unfortunately, the people who use it as a mirror, we get frustrated with because we look at it and we go, how is this person so successful? Or how do they have, 30,000 followers? They look at that lunge. It's terrible, and it's like, that I think those of us that try and use social media is to try and improve the greater good, I think always look at the other side and go,
Oh yeah. Well, I remember having specifically like, there's a really famous trainer who trains really famous people, and you liked him for a long time, and I was like, I can't stand that guy.
I still love him.
I started to like him, because of the opposite, because I can't stand the way he moves.
Yeah,
like it's just god awful. But then I started watching, like I was like, all right, I'll give him a shot. Like Curt likes him, I'll give him a shot. And then I started like, anytime there's a movement video, I'll skip it. And anytime he's dicking around and like answering questions, like I'm all in on it.
It's the best.
So it worked the opposite in that case. But yeah, that was actually a major thing that do you remember with the coaches? And I'm thinking of a few clients specifically where because the person couldn't move well, they would automatically assume that they were stupid.
Yeah.
And then we had to like say like, listen, this is a highly functioning person that's smarter than we'll ever be in their particular field, and they're making a lot of money doing it. Like just because they can't bend their knees so well doesn't mean they're dumb. They just have to figure out like. But it's weird. As soon as they came into our arena, and they couldn't do the things that we were familiar with, we're like, oh, this person's a moron. They were not. They were not morons.
Right.
And if you learn to appeal to them or figure out how to communicate effectively with them, they would make progress. Probably not as much as we'd like to see because we had them for an hour 3 times a week, and they were in their 50s, so they're locked into whatever terrible body shapes they've created at that point, short of extreme effort on our end and extreme commitment on their end, which they weren't going to give. But that was always a weird thing, and I found myself falling into that more and more, but giving people the benefit of the doubt then of like, oh, this person moves really well, they must be awesome. And just nothing there. That's such a bummer, dude. It's such a bummer. So, I mean, I have a few things written down here, and that's actually the second thing was like, do you still follow? Do you have any idiots that you follow that you still follow? Because once in a while, like they strike gold and they just happen to find something good or their movement's worth watching just for the fun of it. Because I do. I have a few people that I'll skip constantly, but I'll keep them around because whatever they decide to parrot works like once every 2 months and it's worth it. But the rest of the time is just agonizing.
Yeah. There's definitely people that I follow that most of the time I see their stuff pop up. I do that like laugh out my nose type thing where you just blow out kind of quick and scroll on. But yeah, every now and then they come up with something where I'm like, hey, you know what? the old blind squirrel found a nut type thing, And I guess that's one of the benefits of people putting themselves all the way out there is that sometimes they come up with such wacky stuff that you actually look at some stuff and go, you know what, that actually I don't know if that's what their intention of it was, but it makes sense for what I'm doing, and so I'll take that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's I've tried to eliminate a lot of that content because I felt that it was not healthy for me in my mindset of growing as a coach to just be allocating a lot of scroll time, getting angry at people who I perceived as not necessarily responsible trainers or more enthusiasts, and watching them do things with their people and those people having no idea what they were doing, at that point, and what they had gotten themselves into.
Yeah.
And I realized after a while that was just something that I was never going to be able to control one way or the other of that, and getting upset about it was just unhealthy for me in a kind of a growth and fitness mindset. And so I tried as much as I could to eliminate some of that stuff, but then I'll get, in our group text with like you and Raph, someone will send something. I'll be like, well, now I'm locked into this for a few months as I accepted this like to follow through, and then a month later I'll take it off and be done with it. But so I've tried to minimize it, but yes, there's definitely still stuff in there that slides through.
I think that's where I draw the line is I watch people do stupid stuff with themselves, but I think as soon as they show themselves doing it in a group setting or like training a client and then making them do it, and let's say it's especially worse if the person's like physically, if the trainer is like very physically capable and they're good at it and they can get away with it, and then you watch like an average 40-something-year-old attempt it and you're like, that's not, like, it was barely okay for your physical freakness to pull it off.
Right.
You definitely should not be having this person do it. I think that's when I tend to unfollow. If they're willing to hurt themselves, I'm willing to watch.
Yeah. I have a big problem too. I hate watching coaches film their clients doing something when clearly there's a coaching cue that needs to be made for the movement that they're trying to coach at that time, and they're not doing it. And now, not only do I consider it to be insulting to their client who's paying a lot of money for their expertise at that point, but you're also showing that it's more important for you to get this content out on social media than it is to actually correct the problem that you see. And I love videos where there is poor movement and you listen to a coach talk through the movement candidly, and maybe by the end of the 30 seconds the person's cleaned up whatever it was, and seeing that I love, and so I'll accept poor form or kind of egregious behavior for a little bit if it looks like it's going to be fixed. But if it's just there and you hear the coach going, good, looks good, like that's where I kind of draw the line with it.
Well, that's something that you mentioned, Raph. That's one of the things that he is like known for, almost not overly coaching, but like he's got it down to such a method that like he'll talk at you while you're doing the movement, during the movement, and he might not offer any corrections for that movement, but you're gonna take whatever he told you for like the next round. Mm-hmm. So he's I don't think he's saying like, well, the ship has sailed, we're just gonna let him get through this. He's obviously protecting someone if they're gonna get way out of whack or like actual have an injury risk, but he's more of like, I'm just gonna give you this one little seed for next round, and then you're safe. It doesn't look great, but you're safe. And if you just keep half this seed in your mind, you're going to be just like that little bit better. And then, so for a lot of people, that might be frustrating because you're like, fix his knee, like move his knee. But if you watch over the course of a year, you'll see that same client there and they'll look completely different.
Right.
And I think we've seen that with Raider, his son.
Oh,
was
absolutely.
Like, you just watching Raider's initial videos, I'm like, please stop doing that, but you knew he was safe and even though it didn't look great when you started loading him up. It's just the way that boy moved. And then over the course of time, you watch him now, you're like, is this like 27-year-old, 8-year-old?
Stronger, faster athlete than I am now.
How old's Raider? Like 10? Is he 10-ish?
He's 10.
He's got to be 10. but he moves like a 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's phenomenal. And the way he dampens force and catches weights and stuff is crazy. But then, so I watch Raph's videos with the sound off. I watch everything with the sound off.
Mm-hmm.
And then like halfway through, I'll turn the sound on when I know he's coaching, right? If it's like
It's a little traumatic once his voice comes back on. It takes you back to
yes, to drowning. And then that saves it, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is a long clip of somebody doing something weird. There must be coaching in here. You turn up, and then he's coaching. But then I'll go to the next person like you're talking about, and I'll be like, oh, let's see what this person's coaching. And there's like, push. And they're like, oh, God, that's not it.
Yep.
That's not the right cue anyways. Yeah, we'll get into Raph and our traumatic experiences down there with him. But yeah, I recently went back to look for some movements, and I fell into the 10-year-old Vimeo and YouTube rabbit hole that he has, and some of the coaching cues were just hilarious.
I mean, we used to sit there, and and this is why I think I kind of always loved his videos, is because they were so coaching saturated, but so hard to follow. And we used to sit on YouTube and try and dissect a 10-minute clip to create a 2-hour workout out of it. And I find myself going back to that 144.1 page pretty frequently when I'm getting a little brain dead on stuff and unfortunately seeing us on there suffering, but also going back and
I mean, that was a major wake-up call for me. You brought me down there to go to the CrossFit football thing, and dude, I'll never forget, like, when we were doing whatever squat workout we were doing, right? I don't remember what it was. I just remember I had very little experience squatting or deadlifting at that point. And he stopped the class, this full weight room, and started berating us for being stupid. And it was basically like, there's 5 of you with significant navicular drop right now, and you're putting yourselves in extreme danger. If you're one of these people, raise your hands. And like one person raised their hand. He's like, there's 4 more of you. Yep. And I'm like, am I one of them? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, God. I'm like, oh. He's like, and I was like, oh, I got a lot to learn. And there were a few other instances there where, man, it was just eye-opening. And that'll be we'll probably get him on here. That'll be a whole thing of him telling people to screw up differently and stop embarrassing the turf and screaming at people to get off the turf. Just fantastic.
Don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
Hear him yell that a lot.
Fantastic coaching. So moving forward then, and we can spin this off as long as you want, but like you talked about how you identify them. I don't know, man. Is it worth having people not, like, if somebody finds value in something, like if Katie follows a page, right? And she finds value in it, I'm more apt to just let her follow it, even if it's garbage, right? Because I know she'll come to me if there's anything like really oddball going on. And this happens with a lot of like influencer pages where they cover way too much ground. And so they might have a really good workout or like a pretty good workout, but then they're talking about like detox shakes or whatever. And for that stuff, she'll come and be like, okay, this guy, I followed this person because of this reason, but now they're doing this. Where would you instruct people to draw the line? Like, it's such a vast field, like fitness, right? And wellness and all that.
I think that for the regular person, not everybody needs an expert all the time for everything. And, some people need the community more than they need an expert. They just need something to move them forward 3 to 4 times a week. And you don't need an expert necessarily to do that. You just need sometimes an environment that's welcoming for you to do that. I think as you start to get into kind of very focused goals, then I think that's where the experts become much more valuable. So I'm not the person to come to if you're going to run a marathon, because I hate running more than 30 meters at a time, and I don't know anything about building up to running a marathon. If you hurt your back at work or you tear your ACL as an athlete, those are the times where I think you need to start finding experts, because you have a very specific goal. And at that point, you don't want a cheering section. You want somebody to really keep you on track on your journey towards whatever that specific goal is. And so that's a lot of times where I'll really get frustrated because, and it happens all the time at work. People will come to me and be like, "Hey, I need shoulder surgery," and the first thing I'm like, "Did you get a second opinion?" And they're like, "No, I went to this, guy out in the country, and this is what he said what I need." And I'm like, and everything from where should I do therapy and what should I do, and then they don't follow through and do it. It's like, what'd you even ask for in the first place?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of it, I also hate when people bite off more than they can chew, and so if going back to run on the treadmill after you've cleared PT is not the bridge of the gap to getting back to work or getting back to competitive sports, and to go into an environment where maybe that's the coach's best effort to give you. Obviously, you're responsible on one side, but I think that's where you really need to hunt around a little bit and do your research and see how this person is going to assist me on my journey, because that's ultimately what it is. Are they going to have a dialogue with me and open communication and set up goals for me to get to where I need to get, versus are they just going to make me do the workout that I saw the person before me do or that they did, on their break? And so, like I said, I guess you can kind of liken it to like your car. It's like if you're going to get an oil change, it's fine to go to, Jiffy Lube or Marathon or something like that. But if you have something, you're not going to go there to get your tires changed, So it's like, depending on what your goal is or what you need to have done, sometimes I think that's where the expert is really becomes valuable at that point.
Yeah, it's really that's specializing down when you have an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just taking the scattergun approach. And yeah, we've seen that a lot of times where I think the probably the field that falls on the sword the most for that is like the chiropractic field, right? Because people will be like, yeah, I tore my ACL, but my chiropractor said I got to come back and see him 3 times a week, and that'll help my knee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, that could, right? There could be a link there. But did he talk about like strength and conditioning? We're like, well, yeah, he's also going to put me through like a strength workout while I'm there. And you're just like, well, this is going to be a tough one.
He's also going to give you your nutrition plan too.
Yeah, this is going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be like, you don't see many shops doing that. Going back to your car thing, like if they're a transmission shop, they may know somebody for brakes, but they're not going to work on your brakes while you're there just for fun.
Right.
And I suppose maybe there's a lot of dual purpose everything out there, right? Car shops and trainers and all of that. But that's the kind of void I talked about in one episode, where you're really at the mercy of whoever's in front of you and the loudest for your own fitness and wellness. Like there is no, if you're not hurt enough to go to the ER, and if you need something more than like a brace or maybe surgical intervention, right? Your primary and even the ER doc isn't going to be able to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So past that, you're looking through the phone book for someone that you kind of dig, and now the phone book is social media.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're dumb like me and you see someone squat while, you're like, that's my guy.
Yep.
And then who knows what? You might just be able to squat well. He might be a complete idiot that's going to hurt you more. But
and that's the thing in our industry too, is like, you get people who are real good at powerlifting and they're great at powerlifting, and you get bodybuilders and they're great at that, but they don't necessarily know vice versa, and you hope that people get to the point where they have enough moral compass to be like, that's not my thing. Let me help you out and direct you to this person. But I think that also, that goes the other way too much, where someone's like, yeah, come in and we'll get you on this program and we'll get you there. And by the time you realize it, it's almost too late,
Oh yeah, you're in. And if they're a charismatic person, then they got you no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
They got you hook, line, and sinker, because you're not going to walk away from that personal bond. You'll feel like you're doing something bad by like saying no to them. Yeah, we've seen that with a few people in the area. It's a total bummer, but people get locked in to inappropriate programs or instruction, but they've been doing it for a long time with them, so that's what they just know how to do.
The other thing too is that, and before this year, I would have said this was mostly limited to our industry, or maybe I just felt that way. But sometimes I feel like the common idiot is given more respect than the industry expert like kind of in a friend circle. So, like if you have your running group and the person who runs a mile 10 seconds faster than you does X, and that X is ridiculous.
Yeah.
A lot of times, your clients will come to you and be like, so-and-so does this. And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's dumb. And you can explain it to them a million different ways from Sunday. And they're still going to be like, yeah, I'm going to do that, and, or, it's same thing in the running group. It's like, oh, my husband goes to this powerlifting gym. You shouldn't go to a powerlifting gym if you're going to be a marathon runner, and vice versa, so it's just, obviously we've seen, the medical profession and stuff like that also join us in that, that plight against the internet warrior. But yeah, I felt like that was a pretty common thing in our industry, was that you could just find anything online, and you constantly had to defend yourself to people who you've put so much mental and, mental time and physical time into. And then after 3 years, they come to you and you're like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, we'd be doing it if I thought it was good,
Yeah.
And
I will say though, those circumstances did force me to grow as a coach, because that's when you found out like how to interview people, and like, okay, are they married to this specific thing or the idea of doing more, and they feel like there's a gap in their program,
Mm-hmm.
so you can plug something else in that's more appropriate instead of this goofy thing, or do they just not trust me, or whatever the case is, and that I don't know if you remember when we went and saw Sue Falsoni talk. I can't remember if you sat in there with me, and she talked about icing with the MLB players, and she was like, we're not icing anymore, we're going to do this movement prep stuff afterwards, and we're going to rehab you through that. It's going to help your recovery. And she almost got fired because the pitchers were like, I have to ice my shoulder.
Yeah.
And
I think I remember that one.
So then she was like, okay, so what we'll do is we'll do the stuff that I want to do, and then you can go ice your shoulder. Like, I know this isn't helping you, but you need it apparently for your brain. So go ice your shoulder, but you're definitely going to do what I want to. And it ended up working out. She got the results she wanted, but she gave them kind of the cookie they wanted too, right? Mm-hmm. So those are horribly frustrating moments when because you start to take it personally, right? You're like mm-hmm. you said, like if that was a good idea, you don't trust me that we would be doing that. You think I'm just kind of
right. It's a volatile environment too, because people are so hesitant to change, especially when they've become comfortable, that it's like when you go out and do continuing education and you look at possibly learning some things and bringing them back to the system that you're doing, people have gotten results and enjoy what you're doing. And then you're going to come in and say, well, you know what, we're going to do things a little bit more this way now, And so I think that change is tough on people, kind of talking about the pitchers. But also, I think that there's a diatribe I was going to go off of that too. And I think
was it CrossFit? Because that's the first thing I thought of, was getting away from CrossFit when you opened the gym. And it was locked at so many, in a benefit way, it was locked at so many members, especially at Tri-Cities. Like, it was always this number. Because for as many people that were coming in, there were 3 leaving on the backside, right? Mm-hmm. And then as soon as we transition away from CrossFit into like the RAF program or a smarter program, then it was different. People had a hard time accepting it at first because they liked the environment that brought, but it was ultimately a beneficial thing,
mm-hmm.
So that kind of works in the opposite spectrum, where we gained not only the environment we wanted, but the membership that we actually enjoyed being around.
Right.
By kind of get away from it.
Well, and and then as a coach, you were much more invested in what happened because you enjoyed using your education.
Yeah.
You had an opportunity to, because you could stop anybody at any point in time and it wasn't ruining their workout. Yeah. It also gave you a lot of creativity, because if you had a 60-year-old guy who'd been flying a desk for a while and he had terrible shoulder mobility, and then you had a competitive, high school football player in there at the same time, you got to use a wide array of skills, to benefit each of those people in there and give them their best bang for their buck. I think what I was going to go back to, talking about the experts, as we were talking about, like Sue Falsoni, was a point of that is that I think that a good expert will constantly review themselves and will not be hesitant to make a change if they think that they've gone the wrong way on something.
Yeah.
And I think you see too many people who just stick to the same thing over and over and over again, and don't actually like look back and go, was that the right thing? Am I going to learn from this mistake and not do it? Or here's how I can make this better. But I think experts do a very good job of self-reflection and going, this is what we knew and taught 10 years ago, but that's not better. Bigger and better things have come out, and smarter things have come out. Maybe saying that was wrong, or maybe saying that here's just a better way to do it, and I think a lot, like even like the ass to grass movement was a big thing for a while, where so much so that people would put like medicine balls on behind you so that you made sure that you were squatting to a certain depth, and then it starts coming out that maybe that's not the best for everyone, depending on the mechanical makeup of their hips, and maybe what that does to their lower back, and starting to realize that maybe setting a standard for everybody wasn't the best thing to do. And now you have to look at each person and going, what's your standard versus a global standard? And, I think if you're willing to look back at yourself and go, yeah, that was a mistake and I really need to learn from that, and make things better, then I think that you're teetering towards moving towards the expert side versus staying as like an enthusiast at that point.
Yeah, I think that's, so the person that came to mind first when you said that was Mike Boyle, because regardless of if you like him or not, based on what he's done the past couple of years, I think that was the basis for like his certification, right? Was he wrote a book, and then he came back and was like, whoops, that book was wrong. So then he created a certification that pretty much contradicted the entire book, so he could have the final say over himself more than anything. I think what we're going to do is the next episode we come together might be why we left CrossFit, why you left CrossFit, and I went with you because I needed a job. Why we left CrossFit and kind of transition there, because I think a lot of people can't imagine their fitness without CrossFit now. But I think a larger contingent of people may be getting held back from fitness because they don't want to do a CrossFit thing.
Sure.
Like I've spoken to several people that have gyms like you have that I used to work at, and that's the first thing you say was like, it's not CrossFit. Like it looks like it, but it's not CrossFit. And we gave that disclaimer a million times.
I still have people at the gym who've been there 10 years who are like, yeah, I go to CrossFit. I'm like, you haven't gone to First of all, you haven't gone to CrossFit ever. But second of all, it at least hasn't been named that for, 12 T-shirts ago.
Yeah. I think I still have an original CrossFit LGN T-shirt.
Yeah, Tay wears it around. She wasn't there at the time, but she must have found one in the office. Yeah, it's comfy.
Man. All right, let's wrap this up because you got to go get Sid. This was good, man. I think we hit on a lot of good points. We exhausted the board, which isn't hard because there's 6 things written on it that you can't read. That's it. Anything to leave off? Otherwise, I'm going to give the typical contact stuff and we're out of here.
I'll just throw it to you.
Cool, man. So if you guys need anything, always reach out, fourthshiftfit@gmail.com, or social media at fourthshiftfitness on all the platforms. I'm uploading a ton of videos on YouTube because I'm doing a ton more movements for my clients, and then I'm doing a couple little shorts on there, just like when I got deadlifting straps, and I have some product demos coming up. I got some neutral grip pull-up bars that add on to a pull-up bar. So I use them a couple different ways, and I'll be shooting that next week. Other than that, thanks for hanging out. You guys are going to hear from Curt a bunch more if he listens to this one, doesn't hate it. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Be a fourth shifter.